everybody. This is Bob Coppage, Crotchio Geek, CEO, Simplex-IT, operating out of the basement of my house. And the reason I'm doing it this particular episode is, one, it doesn't have to do anything with any of those police cars you may have. Anyway, but actually, my wife ended up grounding me by her claim of having COVID. So no big deal. She's fine. We're fine. All that. But BizTech Twists. We're going to talk about technology. We're going to talk about business. We're going to kind of go all over the place. And I was able to get Will Brooks, who is with FifthWall Solutions, to join me, not in my basement, but online. Will, how are you doing? And tell us a little bit about yourself and your basement.
Yeah, good. Yeah, to your point, I am in my basement, but my basement looks really cool right now because I have a green screen. I'm actually in an unfinished basement, so just as fancy. But yeah, we are excited to be able to join you. We being me, I'm excited to jump in here, join you, talk a little bit about all this fun stuff. Just so everyone knows, I'm with FifthWall Solutions. We're an insurance, cyber insurance specifically wholesaler. So our whole focus is around the cyber insurance space. Constantly trying to learn about all this emerging technology, security, all this kind of stuff, and how to best equip people to be considered a good risk for cyber insurance specifically.
And to be clear, Simplex-IT, my managed service provider, we provide IT support for organizations. And FifthWall, we kind of partner, but not directly, in the sense that neither of us are making money off of the other. But you can kind of look over our shoulder to see what the cyber solutions are we're providing and the like, and make sure that our clients are getting the appropriate level of cyber insurance.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, cyber insurance used to be super easy. I think actually you did a webinar with Wes and Reed a long time ago, a year ago. And Wes did his classic getting cyber insurance used to be like Oprah handing out policies on her show, right? You get a policy. They were cheap, they were easy, and then things got really hard. So one of the reasons we partner with you guys is because you provide security, and that's what's needed for cyber. So we want to help kind of build out that whole picture, so it's not as complex. It's simplex.
Simplify the complex. Simplex-IT. Absolutely. Stuff writes itself. But the thing that you and I talked about, because I always have a preliminary conversation with some folks, and sometimes it's literally 5 minutes before we start, and you just hit on it with change. Mm-hmm. And change is huge in IT. It's huge from a technology standpoint. It's huge for organizations that use IT, but in particular, the security side and therefore the insurance side is not only particularly changing at a ridiculous pace, but in ways that we have no control over. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and it's ironic because insurance is actually a major stranger to change. I mean, most insurance lines, like auto, if you've got an auto policy, homeowners, business owners, all that underwriting stuff has stayed relatively the same forever. And now cyber insurance comes along, and pretty much every year things get just as complicated, which really lines it up with the tech industry. So it changes all the time, and a lot of us don't really like change. I mean, that's just the reality of change, right?
Have you seen
my
base? I mean, this wood paneling hasn't been changed since the 1980s.
It's too much work.
I know. But it is interesting. I hadn't really thought about it from that standpoint, because when you look at it from the original use of computers was calculating actuary tables for insurance, for life insurance and the like, because it wasn't changing that often, but they were complicated calculations.
Right.
And to your point, and that was, within some of our lifetimes, not mine in particular, but and then auto changed it. And yes, automobiles change quickly, so on and so forth. Then you got some more, OSHA stuff, blah, blah, blah. But it really wasn't until this whole technology thing where you had such a dynamic change going.
Yeah. And I mean, you think about, I like to compare it to cars sometimes, because cars did change relatively quickly. And for a while it was, my dad has a Ford Model A, and when we drive around in that thing, I mean, there's not a whole lot of risk behind it other than the risk of it not turning on.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's awesome. We get to drive it in parades. We get to, all that kind of stuff, but it doesn't go very fast. And the real change for cars initially was the speed, but then after the speed factor, cars have really just gotten safer. So a lot of the insurance you see around it is do you have all these safety features and we'll give you a ton of discounts, right? It's all about safety, safety, safety. They take the base idea of a car, it's super fast. All right, what are we doing to make it safer? Oh, is there that little alert that goes off if you brake 80 miles per hour? Is there, side cameras to determine if you're too close or drifting in your lane or things like that? But cyber has gotten more dangerous, and I
Yeah.
think that's the difference. Um, all the changes we see in the auto industry are pretty much just, oh, this new security feature came out, another way for underwriters to offer discounts or to know that their risk is safer and better. The challenge is that the risk of driving hasn't really changed. You have people who get behind the wheel of a car, and except for maybe self-driving vehicles, but I don't really want to go down that path. But you have people who get behind the wheel of a car and they drive, and if they're paying attention, they're safer than if they're not paying attention. And there's little check boxes. But with cyber, I mean, you just think of your internet exposure. Everybody's doing different things. New websites pop up, new threats pop up. Things are always kind of in this amorphous state of change all the time, and you think you get it, and then it's just there's new technology. There's an Apple event going on right now where they're talking about all the new iPhones and AirPods and all these kind of things. I was watching it right before I jumped on this call, so it happens every year. You buy your iPhone, it's obsolete in a year and you got to go buy the next one, right? And it's just that's kind of the trend we see just even in the security space.
Well, and you think about it because, and a friend of mine told me, and this would have had to have been back in the early 90s, that the definition of obsolete in IT is, does it work?
Yeah.
Because once it works, then there's somebody else coming out with something else that's cutting edge that goes beyond that, that still has some pieces, parts to figure through. And the other thing is that every time, unlike cars, where, like you said, we're still driving from point A to point B, we want more comfort. We want to get there quicker. We want more entertainment value. We want more storage or people or whatever. But at the end of the day, we're driving from point A to point B. Whereas every year, heck, every 6 months, if not quicker, we are coming up with a new way to use technology and data and the interaction of stakeholders, whether that be clients, vendors, ourselves, our employees, to bring added value to whoever those players are. And that
Yeah.
could be something that's evolutionary or revolutionary. But every time we do that, there's a bad guy looking at, we can use that. We can come up with a way of taking that and turning it into something that's going to make money for us at the cost of those same stakeholders.
Yep.
So yeah, you've got this evolution and revolution that's constantly going on. That is both, here's the new technology and here's the new ways to take advantage of it from an adversarial standpoint.
Yeah, and I mean, even you talk about does it work, but then you have, let's use the example of iOS devices. A new iPhone comes out every year. In 6 years, that iPhone that you currently have, they say, I'm just going to have this forever. Now they're not offering security updates for it anymore. So on top of, hey, this new technology is out, I'm going to learn for ways to bypass it. There's also these old technologies that exist that people are still using, and it actually really opens them up to some serious issues because there's no updated security coming in. And I mean, I'm a bit of I'm not going to call myself a hacker because it's probably not a good idea on a security minded conversation, but I do a lot with I'll get really old video game consoles, right? So like handhelds. So I'll mod them. I'll do micro soldering on their motherboards to add new chips and compartments and all that kind of stuff. It's a hobby, but on certain like older systems that had their own OS built into them,
right,
people have figured out ways to bypass it and add all sorts of things now. So they're just completely open. It's almost like an open source system on a handheld gaming device. And if I can do that to a gaming device, you can only imagine what a professional hacker can do to your old phone that's no longer got security updates. There's that whole side.
Well, and because I remember back when I first started working on I say PCs, but it actually predates PCs, microcomputers. There was 4K of RAM. So whatever program you wrote had to fit into that memory space. So you used every trick, every imaginative thing you could do to cut down on the set of instructions, which meant that security had absolutely nothing whatsoever to do in terms of our priorities. And even then, when it became, okay, now it's 64K, it's 640K, it's a meg, it's 8 meg, whatever, we were still wildly focused on the productivity. And how do we get data from point A to point B as quickly and effectively as possible? And how do we do so in a way that will work both in local networks and then cloud and this, that, and the other thing? And so we built things that absolutely had holes in it. And then it's kind of
Yeah.
like, all right, how do we retrofit? And it's really hard to put a jet engine on a biplane, just
I don't
because
know
we
if this.
figure it doesn't work well. So at some point, you have to take a look at the older technology and say, we can't develop that any further.
Right.
And what's interesting is more often than not, the bad guys can now get in easy peasy because there was a wide open. But sometimes actually it turns out that the bad guys are using advanced enough technology that it won't work on the old stuff. So the old stuff ends up being, again, rare. It's the exception, not the rule.
Right.
But you have it where it even out the technology advances for the bad guys outpace the old stuff.
It's hilarious. Well, yeah, but I mean, it makes sense. I'm thinking back when I first when my parents first got internet for us when I was a kid, right? Dial up, and everything was slow, but it was the internet, and that was a
Oh
big
yeah,
deal. But at the same time, you had to get Norton antivirus or McAfee or something, right? You had to
yeah,
have your antivirus on there, but it made your computer so slow.
yep.
It's so slow, and that was annoying because, and I'm pretty sure people would just disable it because it was annoying.
Oh, absolutely.
Um,
Or they would keep it running, but they would make it so that everything passes. So no, my
it's the
antivirus
firewall
is
with no
running.
fire.
Yeah, it's absolutely running and all that. But that's part of the dilemma that people
Yeah,
look at from a productivity standpoint. My productivity is faster than this imagined security. Therefore, I'm willing to not do multi-factor authentication. I'm willing to not use the appropriate firewalls. I'm willing to go ahead and approve applications without really knowing whether they're safe or not,
yeah,
because we've been told since birth productivity is cool. We want more productivity.
yeah. It's a great point. I mean, I even think of technology aside, like when I'm in a meeting and I'm having a conversation, or the people in the room in the meeting are having a conversation about something, and based on one thing someone said, my brain has already jumped to the conclusion of what this whole conversation is going to be about. And
Uh-huh.
then it takes 20 minutes to get there, and you're like, I could have been doing something else. Right. And it's like, I wish I could just turn off this meeting. I don't want to be at this meeting right now. Right. And that like has translated over to our tech use, but the way we get around it is to say, oh wait, I can do other things, so I'm going to disable security because that's annoying. I don't want to put in a code. I don't have to wait 5 seconds for a text to come to my phone, so I'm just going to disable MFA or things like that. Right, where it's almost like anything that presses pause on your productivity is bad.
Right. And this is especially true if the organization is focused productivity, productivity, productivity. What are your KPIs? What have you been able to do? How have you done these sort of things and all that? Oh, by the way, be secure. Now about your productivity, you really need to yada yada yada. So it's a cultural thing as well. And
Yeah.
and you could almost make this case about any type of behavior that is viewed as a long-term negative. You could, say ageism, sexism, any of those sort of things. If an organization doesn't make that as these are the expectations you're supposed to do, and it's a priority, don't blame your employees if they're not doing it.
Right. Yeah, that's a great point. So it's just interesting that it has translated over to tech, but it makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, anything that puts a damper, and I guess that's the part of the challenge is before I got into cybersecurity, cyber insurance, all that kind of stuff. I kind of took a sidestep because I got married and I live on Long Island where it's not cheap to live, and my current job where I was working as a pastor was not making me the money I need to live here, even though I loved what I was doing. So I said, okay, got a sidestep here, and I'm gonna go work in finance, right? And so I started doing financial advising, and literally every day it was wake up, get your entire calendar of who you're going to talk to on that day, plan it all out, make 20 phone calls a day, go door to door, walk on the pavement. There shouldn't be a pause moment in your day.
Right.
And some people operate like that, and they're robots and they're amazing and they do an amazing job at being able to just do that. They're hyper focused on that task on hand and they go, go, go. But that grind was the hardest part about that grind is it felt like there was never room to breathe. And it's almost like the I'm sorry if I'm getting way off topic here, but it's almost like that productivity piece pushes us to the point where we don't know how to stop, right? And so it's just interesting.
But see, now I'm going to bring us back.
Yeah, great. Because my
Okay.
philosophy brain is like, let's talk about the art of stoppage.
Well, but there is, because when we're talking about change, you could have change within an organization that they don't recognize as necessary. So if you've got this culture where all we want you to do is the same thing you've done day after day for the last X years, if all you've done is the same widgets, if all you've done is the same food, if all you've done is the exact same service over the past X number of years, you're missing out on something. Because I don't
Mm.
think there is an organization or a vertical or an industry or whatever that, especially over the past 5 years, that has not significantly changed either from an opportunity standpoint or from a risk standpoint. And I think one of the biggest challenges is the employees, whether it be from fear or this has worked for me so far, why would I change it?
Stubbornness.
Exactly. But it
Yeah.
could be stubbornness based on the success
Mhm.
of their productivity. So it's, that's what we want them to do. That's what they think. But organizations, both from an opportunity and a risk standpoint, aren't willing to entertain that there could be a change or could be a strategy. And part of the challenge is when you have an opportunity that you don't go after, yeah, we didn't get the opportunity, but everything else is fine and peachy to a point.
Yeah.
But from a security standpoint, if you're not adopting or adapting to new security threats or maturing security threats, the bad guys are going to have that much of an easier time, because the tools they're using in 2023 are different from the tools they were using in 2022.
Mhm.
And if your strategies or tactics aren't up to date with that, then even though you're sitting back going, we're covered because we're doing the same thing we did last year, actually you're sliding back.
Yeah.
You just don't know it. So to that person who's doing that same thing, making those same 20 calls, if their CEO is also, and if their IT support is also, and if their sales manager is also doing the same thing over and over and over again, that's a dangerous thing.
Yeah. I mean, that got me thinking technology is supposed to make our lives easier, right? I mean, that's
Yeah, yeah.
that's
Who said that? I don't.
the ideal the ideal, right? Advances in technology throughout history. I'm not talking about computers, but the
Okay.
advances in technology throughout history is ideally meant to simplify things. Right? Like I remember in science class growing up, simple machines, right? It's like, oh, you take this thing, and now you have a lever. It's like, oh, wow, right? And it's the idea is to make things easier, but rather than make things easier, a lot of times it creates a hurdle first that you have to get past, right? And I think of the evolving of now we go to cybersecurity here, and when new cybersecurity methods even came on the scene. So let's talk about two-factor authentication because that's a really popular one. It was, I mean, if you go to the real basic, it was like, hey, add two-factor authentication to your email. So we're going to send you an email to a separate email account with a code in it that you have to go and get and paste into your thing. So it was like, wait, I have to go open another browser window. I have to go into that other email, log into that, and then get, whatever. It
Right.
became a process. Now they're like, hey, we'll send you a text to your phone. Oh, that's a little easier. Still kind of annoying because I have to type something. Now I have a manager that literally pulls it in automatically from an encrypted source as long as I can scan my fingerprint. So I don't
Right.
have to go anywhere. So it has gotten better, but you still have to kind of get in line with it. And when it comes to security, I mean, you think of someone's home, they're going to secure their home, they're going to lock their doors at night, some of them are going to get alarm systems or security systems, camera systems, all that kind of stuff. We're willing to do that for our homes, but we're not really thinking of that in our digital window, right? And that's, I think, part of the challenge is we don't think of these annoying, like when you'd have to go into your house and press the little keypad button to unlock your or turn off, disable your alarm. I mean, isn't that MFA? You didn't
But
just use the key to get into your house, but you need the
true,
code.
true. But well, actually, is it MFA? If you're not using a physical key, you're only using the code.
No, you need key too.
Oh,
I'm
need the
not
key.
talking. I
Okay,
don't.
then it's
I'm not
MFA. All
talking
right.
about the key, the smart locks. I'm talking about you use the key to get in, and then you have to turn
Then
around
you
and
have to
press
do
the
the code.
panel.
Okay. No, no, no. All right. I should correct it. I should correct it. But here's the thing: could you imagine doing that 20 years ago or 10 years ago, of having that for your home? Because if you think about it from a movie standpoint, or from a TV standpoint, if you saw the character going to their house and then do the code, your immediate thought was that person is important or that person is paranoid, because that's what the movie or show was trying to convey, because only rich or paranoid people would have that level of security.
Sure.
And now, oh, they must have the doorknob thing, or the door camera, which I can't remember the name of the thing.
There's so many. Ring. Say
Rings.
ring.
Just say what? Well, that's exactly the one I meant. No, but it's one of those where now it's accepted.
Yeah.
And to a certain degree, the same thing. I remember when seatbelts were used to keep the groceries from flying all over the place when mom was going crazy on the car.
The milk.
Yeah.
If the milk spilled in the car, your car would stink.
Yeah. And so it was a totally different risk analysis. Essentially, I think I just had a breakthrough. I thank you for this therapy session. My mother cared more for the milk than me.
That's the issue. Yeah, well, you didn't secure the milk. Oh, man.
Absolutely. They can clean the
Technology's
bloodstains.
gotten better, but our ability to store milk without spilling has not, unfortunately.
But it is interesting, because you have all of these changes from a technical standpoint. Again, I'll get back to from the opportunity and the risk standpoint, from an organizational side, and from an individual side. They're changing, and they're actually maybe more in parallel than we realize.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it is. And I mean, they're changing, I think, for the better, but it's to your point before, that it's hard to see it as better, because it's almost like as soon as I've adapted to being able to do this thing to protect myself, a new threat has emerged. And now a new security solution has to get stacked on top of that. So it's almost like this never ending game, as opposed to, oh, you built a house. Well, this is how you do it. Things really haven't changed much. Maybe the
Right.
materials have, so it's like that kind of thing it's hard for, I think, really hard for us to settle our minds on technology, because it's so rapidly evolving and it's just getting faster.
Well, I think the concept that I like to use on this is the concept of infinite game. And infinite game, there is no end. There is no final score. There is no specific winner and or specific loser. And so you are always evaluating your place. You're always evaluating your strengths, your weaknesses. You're always evaluating so on and so on and so forth. And life is much more of an infinite game than a finite game. Finite game, we were talking beforehand, chess is a finite game. It ends when there's checkmate. Poker is not. It ends when people go, I'm tired, I want to go home.
Yep.
Because it's hands and all that kind of good stuff. And also, if you think football, baseball, all of the sports that we always play, those are all finite games, whereas politics, infinite. International relations, infinite. Business relations, infinite. And it may change because one of the players goes out of business or the like, but there's another company who's coming in, take over.
The nature of business is an infinite game.
Yeah.
And we're saying, yeah. And so the rules have to change too, wouldn't they? Like, isn't that the mindset there? Football,
I think the mindset has to change.
Yeah.
You have to accept the fact, and because so many of us get caught up in that whole, we have to meet this year's sales. Okay, are we going to sacrifice next year's sales in order to do that? Are we going to put all of our, we're going to double down on the marketing and the sales process and all that kind of fun stuff, so we won't have any money to prep anything for next year. But yay, we made our goal this year and we're broke.
Yeah.
No, we're going to try to do things in a long, more infinite way. And I think
no, go ahead. I'm just thinking. I'm thinking from the insurance perspective. We've worked with a lot of agencies, right? And again, we're a wholesaler, so we're kind of like we have access to carriers that a lot of agents wouldn't. So we work with a lot of agency partners, and the ones who are successful, the ones who have found success, even if they've been in business for like 30 years, is they say, I'm going to hire a cyber guy at my agency. So they have one agent at their agency who only does this cyber thing because
Mhm.
it's so rapidly evolving. So what they said is, look, I can't expect my entire staff to understand cyber insurance because it's really complicated. So we're going to hire this one guy who really seems to like it and bring him on board. And that's going to be his focus. That's what he's going to do. And those are some of our most successful partners. Is it's that adaptation.
Yeah.
It's saying, well, the entire model of my business doesn't have to change. Everything I do doesn't have to change, but I need to tweak it here to bring in someone who can handle this new facet that I'm dealing with. And I think when it comes to tech, when it comes to cyber, all those things, it changes at a pace that most other things don't. And because of that, it needs some specialization and understanding.
I'll even double down on that. And this is one of the things that occurred to me about a month or so ago. And I've said this at a couple other places and talks and the like. If you look at the three biggest changes to the IT world, and I've said before, IT was originally all about technology with a little bit of information. Then it was information and technology. Now it's the information that's driving it. Okay. You look at the three things that have happened most recently in the last 10 years on IT, and they are, roughly speaking, security, big data, and now AI. And if you look at the skill set and the mindset necessary to understand those three aspects of technology, they are not your traditional IT tools. They are not servers. They are not desktops. They are not programming. They are not websites. They are not cloud. They're not whatever. They have completely different mindsets and completely different ways of approaching, both from a risk and an opportunity standpoint. And I think one of the problems, and this is true for IT people as well, is that we automatically assume that since it's an implementation of IT goods and services, that a traditional IT person should be able to be either good enough on these things or make a transition easy peasy. And I think that's not,
Yeah.
and I think a lot of us think that we can do that ourselves. But I think these three things in particular, they are very, very different beasts than what we're used to in terms of IT.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I mean, I guess that makes sense. I mean, if you're working
I may
in,
ask you to sign something to that effect because that doesn't
yeah,
get stated often that I made sense.
nice. I mean, have you ever seen that show, the IT guys? I think, or the
Oh,
IT
absolutely.
crowd, or whatever, right? So
Yeah.
if that is what, I wouldn't trust those guys with my cybersecurity,
Yeah. Absolutely.
but they know IT, like how to
They
turn
know the
off your
servers.
machine and turn it back on
Yeah, the
again.
one guy. Yeah.
So there's that side, right?
Yeah.
But there's that emerging piece where you almost need to either be or have someone on your team who is just that nerd who eats up new information, who's just like,
But
I want to
but
go
it's a
ahead.
different type of nerd.
Yes.
That, I guess that's what I'm saying. That person has to let go of, it's not bits and bytes.
Yes.
It's not hard drives and servers and this, that, or the other thing. Even it's not even firewalls. And it is, you have to understand all of the nuances of security,
Yep.
all of the ways that there's an ebb and flow. There's the financial component. There is the risk acceptance, the risk tolerance, the communication, the end user, all that sort of stuff. When you take a look at big data, it is, how are you using your own data? How are you turning potential energy of your stored data into actual actionable data and all that? You have to know where to pull heterogeneous or data sources and integrate them all. And then AI, where to start. What's the difference between knowledge-based systems and AI, and how do we empower ourselves, and yada yada yada. All three of those are just taking totally, in my opinion, totally different mindsets in terms of people who develop the skills. And right now, I think in our industry, and I'm probably guilty of it on occasionally as well, we tend to oversell ourselves as experts on these things just because we're IT people.
Right.
And to your
I know
point,
more than you do about computers, and
yeah,
therefore
exactly. No, I watched a
I'm
YouTube
a
video
pro.
right before I came on. So,
I just watched one of Simplex's talks on, behind a green screen, and I was like, oh, I can do this. Cool.
absolutely. Well, and I read the script of one of the green screens, so I must be an expert.
Yeah, there you go. But you're right. I mean, it's very easy to pose when your ability and educational level on a particular subject is slightly higher than someone else. You just, it's
Yeah.
the kind of thing where, I mean, people say fake it till you make it, or you just need to be the smartest guy about that thing in the room. And it's like, that doesn't make you an expert. Um,
Yeah,
but
I mean, you don't want to be in a situation where someone says encouragingly to you, "Fake it till you make it," and your
no,
response is, "Pass me the scalpel, nurse."
right. Yeah,
You know?
exactly. And I think that's where, but in the technology space, when I say nerd, I mean like that information vacuum, that person like a shop vac of information. Like
Yeah,
this person just wants to go out and learn and understand. And I think that person also needs to be gifted in teaching. And that's the other hard part is, like you said, it's shifted from technology with a little bit of information to mostly information with a little bit of tech.
yeah.
And because of that, if we are not good at the ability to convey the information that we understand, then what are we doing? I mean, I think I've seen the people who adapt security. I made a LinkedIn post about this. I was at someone's house the other day. A neighbor posted in a community group, "Hey, my computer, I got a brand new computer and printer. I have no idea how to set it up."
Uh,
Right. And I got there and I opened up their computer. It got to the Windows startup screen, like when you first have to start up the whole OS,
yeah.
and the Wi-Fi card was turned off in the laptop. So they couldn't figure out, Windows doesn't let you, Windows 11 now for some reason doesn't let you do startup without an internet connection. So I had to bypass that whole thing, right? And you had to do all that crazy back
Uh,
stuff. But at the end of the day, after all of that was set up, she knows how to use Windows. She knows what she's doing, but had no understanding of Windows Defender, had no understanding of how to, good password management, all this kind of stuff. So I took it upon myself to at least give a little bit of education. I'm no pro, but I was able to at least explain a little bit, right? And it's the kind of thing where, with the ability to teach, which I've been a teacher, mostly math, right? And that's, but having that ability to teach and convey a complex topic to someone, like they're 5 years old, right, and understand it at least to a minimal degree, I think gets you over the edge of change. It helps people understand why those changes need to be made and how to best practice them, rather than just, oh, you got to do this thing. This is my recommendation to you. Go do it.
okay, I'm going to hold you to that, but I'm also going to hold you to something we talked about before we started this conversation, and that is improv. But we're going to first take a commercial break, and then we will be right back.
Great.
Don't let IT overwhelm you. Simplex-IT's Learning Center provides easy-to-understand answers to your most commonly asked IT questions. Our videos cover both technical and non-technical topics, everything from cybersecurity to cloud computing, managed services to co-managed services, and how easy it is to work with us. All so you can stay ahead of the game and maximize your IT. We have over 100 videos, so visit simplex-it.com today and look for our Learning Center. And not all videos have Bob in them.
Wait, what? What?
Simplify your complex IT with Simplex-IT.
And we're back again. Bob Coppage, CEO, Crotchety Old Geek, Simplex-IT, and Will Brooks. And we are talking about change, but we're talking about communication and teaching. But when we talk about teaching, because a lot of stereotypes about IT people is we are condescending and arrogant and rude. And I hate people who say that about me because they're wrong. But not only is it a teaching thing, but it's just a general communication, right? That's a skill
Yeah.
we need to get better at.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people are pretty terrible at communicating, and I think when you're
Okay, we're done.
there you go. Right, goodbye. When we're in a sales role, especially, or a role where we're trying to make suggestions to people. I mean, I do this in insurance all the time, right? There's the traditional way of selling insurance, which is, I'm going to burn your business down metaphorically and just scare you, and then you're going to
Right.
buy my policy. Or there's, hey, let's talk about all these different coverages and what they actually do and what they actually secure, and how a lot of that is much more than, I like to tell clients all the time, look, you're working with Bob, and Bob is able to get your computer back online when something goes wrong. But is that the only thing that really happens? Let's look at all these coverages. Why do they exist on a policy? What are they covering on top of, oh, my computer has this screen that says, pay me $1 million or you're not getting your data back? There's a lot more to it than just that. So I think it's being able to take the conversation, recognize kind of what's happening. You brought up improv right before the commercial break. Talk about, observe what's happening when you're having this conversation. If you're bringing up something like EDR, endpoint detection response 24/7, you say those words and someone's eyes just glaze over.
Right.
You need to be able to get that context clue and say, okay, hold on, time to shift gears and explain what the heck I
Yep.
just said.
So you've got to be, so you can't just go, and honestly, I think this is true with any business relationship where the thing that you're projecting, whether it is a cautionary tale, whether it is a service, a good, employment, whatever, you have to be able to, and what I refer to it is you have to be able to geek it up or geek it down. Because at the end of the day, the only person who can judge what you say is your audience. You don't have a vote in this. And so, like you say, we basically, okay, I went too far. I went too deep on the technical side. Tell me how far to dial back. And that's that give and take. And it's also, to a degree, it's improvised. Because we need to make sure that at the end of the day, they're getting the value out of that conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. It just made me kind of think all the links of putting, I love when you have a conversation that's completely random and unscripted, but then everything kind of feeds into a single point. So we were talking all about being that nerd who just is so excited about absorbing information. Right. And then we talked about the ability to communicate those things, but then we also talked about the rapidly changing nature of security. And so you need to be that person who can not only teach, but you need to recognize that, or someone on your team who's just willing to learn and understand and say, okay, I want to absorb this information because I recognize this is an evolving industry.
Right.
So there's the teaching side and the communicate side. There's also just the receptive side. It's the understanding that, everything is changing really rapidly. And just because Bob set me up with this security package this year, I can't really get into the mindset that I'm just good to go forever. So I need to be open to what is being communicated and ask those questions, desire to learn, try to understand, as opposed to, because I think it can be overwhelming, honestly, with security. There's so much.
If it isn't, we're not paying attention.
Exactly. So, I mean, I think there's the two sides of this coin here is the willingness to understand and ask questions, but also from the sales standpoint, whatever it is you're selling, being able to communicate more than just the manipulative techniques of this is why you need this thing. Like, let's talk about, it's really, no, I firmly believe in my product and this is why I think it's important. So now it's the same as when you're securing someone else. And now I'm the client that you're trying to secure, Bob. And I'm saying, well, why do I really need this? And I think that's a challenge, is we need to be just as open to learning about these things as we are expecting our IT professionals to have what's best for us, right?
Yeah, but at the end of the day, we all have to be informed.
Yeah.
However you define that, and we all have to be informed to such a point where we're willing to abdicate to that trusted third party, and that third party may be an employee within your organization, because it is overwhelming, and all aspects of IT are overwhelming if you try to be the expert who understands and knows everything, or you will never be invited to a good party. It's one or the other, so you have to a certain degree, say, I understand enough. And the simple analogy would be, I just need the 20,000 foot view. Give me the 20,000 foot view. You guys are down in the weeds. That's absolutely wonderful. I think you're great. And just make sure that occasionally you can dabble your toes, test it, whatever, get a better feel for it. But you have to then say, my 20,000 foot view is going to be different a year from now, because a year from now, it is going to be different even at the 20,000 foot view.
Yeah.
And similar, the people who are in the weeds, and you can have somebody at the 10,000 foot view who is acting as kind of a conduit between the two. There's a role for that as well. It's not an all or nothing. So you can have somebody who has a good enough understanding about both the business process and the cybersecurity standpoint, who can essentially, I'm the translator for both parties.
Yeah.
So, but at the end of the day, you have to understand who your audience is and what's being communicated and done.
Yeah. And when it comes to tech, you have to understand that it's not a stagnant industry, right?
Yeah.
It is constantly evolving. My eyes were so open to this when I started working in cyber insurance. I mean, I knew when I was a kid, whenever something went wrong in the house with our computers or anything, it was usually my fault because I was trying something new that I probably should, the one family computer, right? Back before everyone had their own devices and all that kind of stuff. So we had the one computer and typically I broke it, but it was fun. But it's this mindset today of, it is rapidly evolving so quickly, and cyber insurance so opened my mind to that, because 3 years ago, when we first had when the pandemic really first hit and everyone went remote, carriers required no security to get a cyber policy.
Yeah.
A year later, they added 1 control. 2 years later, they added 3 controls. Now they're at 5, and they keep adding more and more to this list of required security that you have to have, because they're understanding, one, what is helping secure services, but also the threats keep changing.
Right.
So it's this mindset of, if we can get the mindset of change, and I know I said it before, we don't have to change everything, but we have to be open to some change in terms, especially in the tech sector, because things are so rapidly changing. And there's the other side of it, where our entire business is done online. I mean, I work from home. I sit at this desk, or I stand at this desk, depending on how I'm feeling. And when I go from a morning meeting to working on email to doing other things, nothing I do is local. It's not local on my machines anymore. It's all on the web. So like
Right.
my entire livelihood and the entire business that I work for is done online. So we have to be willing to say, okay, if the majority, we don't have a building, well, I guess we do have an office space, but we rent it. So the entirety of our staff is remote most of the week. So if that's the case, the whole like commercial property thing that insurance used to handle, it's becoming a lot less, and cyber is becoming a lot more. And that's because there's a recognition that this change has shifted to this industry that is consistently evolving, and it's challenging. We have to keep up with it.
So when we talk about keep up with it, and I'm going to see if I remember, because we came up with an end question, and you were going to back me up by if I couldn't remember the end question. So you still may have to.
I'll change the answer. I'll answer it the way you wanted me to, even if you ask the wrong question, and everyone will be so confused.
I know. It basically, they'll go, what is it? What does a kumquat have to do with cybersecurity? But okay. So someone's listening from the business standpoint, and we'll say business management standpoint, and they are confused. Not necessarily overly insecure, secure, or whatever, but they're just confused. What would 3 steps be that they should do to try to alleviate, or at least get on a better path?
Are we talking about from the tech perspective?
Business management, who's just confused from the cybersecurity aspect overall.
Yeah. Well, I think on the first side of it is, you do need to get a hold of an expert. So if you're working with a security provider, awesome. I think that's really helpful. And you need to find someone who's capable of translating the confusion, right? That's one of the things we talked about, is it's not just you. We don't expect you to jump on YouTube today and just learn all this cybersecurity stuff yourself. Just as much as if you're the CEO of or if you're a lawyer from a law firm, I'm not going to go on, buy Lawyers for Dummies and learn all about law. I don't have the time for that, because that's not the nature of my business. So I understand that. So find someone who gets it, right? And then allow that person to teach you and educate. I think that learning and education piece is vital. So I'd say that'd be my number one, is just being willing to learn. Another one, this is going to sound crazy, and is find a, so at the beginning of the talk, we said how Simplex and FifthWall work together. And one of the reasons we work together is that cyber insurance carriers charge a lot of money when you don't have really good security. So a lot of times what happens, you say, well, one of the reasons I'm so frustrated and confused is because my cybersecurity budget isn't there. Like, it's being blown up, or, a lot of the people we work with, they go out and buy a $10,000 cyber policy, and they have minimal security controls, but then the MSP, their service providers coming to them and saying, hey, you need to implement these different controls. And they're saying, I don't have any money to do that. So if you can work with someone who can help you rearrange your budget to say both of those things work in tandem, and the prices can actually work off one another. So that can help in those business decisions, which I think is really helpful. And then, the last part, I think, is just have that willingness to understand. And I don't know if this is a good application, but have that willingness to understand that I'm not going to know everything, but I have to be open to the idea that my business is never fully secure from the technical standpoint.
Right.
So I have to keep learning and listening to my managed service provider, my IT guy, who can help me understand the changes in the industry that affect my particular business, right? And there's there's all that to talk about. So find someone you trust, someone who can teach you and learn kind of the budget side of things. It can really help.
So cool. So one aspect that I'm going to double down on is the relationship. Find the expertise and build that relationship with that expertise, both on the IT side and the cybersecurity side. And often those are not necessarily the same people or the same organizations. They can be, but they aren't necessarily. So
yeah, find people you jive with. I think that's, I mean,
you just seriously said jive?
Yeah. Business is relationships.
Wow.
Right? I mean, it is. And
no, it is.
Do people not say jive anymore?
I don't know.
I was born in the 90s. I don't know. They probably stopped using jive before I was born, but sometimes it just works.
No, I'm good with it. I'm just a little bit surprised.
But yeah, I mean, business is relationships.
Absolutely.
And that's not just on, I mean, I know when you're selling, like if you're a business owner and you're hiring salespeople, you want to find salespeople who are good at making relationships. That should be the same as when you're going out and looking for cybersecurity experts. Who's someone who you can relate to, right?
Yeah.
Someone who actually is actively looking to be personal with you and personable with you, versus the guy who is afraid to talk on the phone or actually show his face in person because social awkwardness, right?
Not only that, but from the standpoint of cybersecurity is not a transactional relationship for most companies. It is a relationship.
Yeah.
It's not just transaction.
It's good. Yeah.
So Will, thank you very much. So if people want to learn more, follow you, talk to you, stalk you, whatever, how do they go about doing that?
You can find me on LinkedIn, Will Brooks, or go to FifthWallSolutions.com. If you want to, I mean, I know you don't have to do that. Just talk to Bob, because ultimately he's going to be the one to plug in with us anyway. But you can follow all the fun, nerdy memes that I post all the time. If you find me on LinkedIn,
they are fun and nerdy. They are. So Will, thank you very much. And appreciate us sharing each other's basement, even though I was brave enough to show you mine.
Well, mine, I jumped on a call with someone, and I did before I had the green screen put up, because we just moved in this house in May, and you just saw like literally 2x4s. That was all that was there. And they're like, "Are you guys even profitable yet as a business?" I was like, "What does my basement have to do with that?" But I get it. Use the blur.
And honestly, I don't know how to do a background. I've never bothered to learn. It's one of those where. So, anywho, as always, everybody, thank you very much for BizTech Twist. Will, thanks for joining. And you know the story by now. Too many thumbs up are being lost every day because they are not being given the proper attention that they need. You could save a thumbs up. That thumbs up could be saved by your action of clicking on it. And then you could subscribe, and every once in a while we'll send you pictures of your thumb up and how they're living a great and carefree life. Do your part.
Click that little bell too, and that'll give you alerts every time you have to give a thumbs up.
Would you want to hear from somebody else that your thumbs up got married? I don't think so. So,
awesome.
And we're done.